A predator for a president? I don't think so. You deserve better. It's time to get out of the United States and into a better country. Let's look at France. Why France? Because they take things seriously. First, I'll quickly cover some compelling things about France that are going to sound so refreshing to you as an American. Second, I'll include a few practical tidbits on visas, income, and healthcare in a conversation I had with an actual expert. And third, we'll have some fun with locations and life abroad, because that's truly the dreamy part, am I right? In the last 24 months alone, France has set the global standard in accountability. First, they prosecuted dozens of rapists in the largest rape case in the country's history. When a defendant appealed his 9-year sentence this October, the judge actually increased it to 10 years. That's what taking it seriously sounds like. Also, let's talk about bodily autonomy. While America is dismantling our rights to healthcare as women, France actually became the very first country in the world to add abortion protection directly into its constitution. It's no longer just a law, it's a foundational human right. Also, let's talk about feminist leadership. We've probably heard the buzzword, but France is actually leading the way in feminist foreign policy. And they say so very proudly. They've committed 75% of all of their foreign aid to advance women's rights. They're not just fixing things at home, they're supporting equality worldwide, which I think is so amazingly inspiring. And representation. In France, women hold 51% of ministerial positions. They're not just having seats at the table, they're actually setting the policy and signing the laws. Compare that to the 33% that we see in Trump's cabinet. So I think there's a little bit of a gender imbalance there. And of course, healthcare. It's a huge topic here in the United States. In France, healthcare is also seen as a human right broadly. In the United States, your health insurance is tied to your job, but in France, healthcare is universal, regulated, and it's treated as a public good. Medical bankruptcy is not even a thing there. And here's where it gets really, really interesting for those of us that are just sick and tired of the oligarch era in the United States. Here, tech billionaires set their own rules and they buy their own politicians. In France, platform owners are actually held legally responsible for the harms that they enable. Let's take Telegram, for example. With over 1 billion users worldwide, the founder and CEO, Pavel Durov, was actually detained and investigated in France for systematic failures to stop criminal activity on his platform. Now let's talk about X. Just this month, February 2026, French prosecutors took it a step further. They raided X's offices in Paris and summoned Elon Musk for questioning as part of a criminal investigation into his alleged failures for how X is handling harmful content, including sexual deepfakes, child sexual abuse material, and large-scale misinformation that regulators say could undermine democratic processes. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? France is taking it seriously. America's like, yay, let's just let it happen. So it's not about censorship, it's about the rule of law. In France, no one is too rich to be a citizen. Is France perfect? Absolutely not. There's no place that's perfect. Let's just put that out there on the table. But progress there is institutional. It's not just ideological. It's built into the fabric of the state, which means it's a lot harder for one bad leader to undo everything. I bet that's all really cool to hear, but you're American. What can you do? I'm sure that moving to France seems daunting. Where do you even begin? Do you have to speak French? I've interviewed a French relocation expert for my podcast, 101 Ways Out. Her name is Cecile Weiland, and she specializes in helping Americans resettle in France. Check out a little bit of our interview.
It's like I'm a matchmaker. I'm matching you to the part of France, that will work for you. And then after that, it's really a matter of producing your departure and arrival in France, departure from the United States. And it's not difficult for retirees, especially, to move to France because they don't have to work in France.
Yeah.
If you have to work in France and you need a special kind of visa, that can get trickier. It's possible to do it, but it's definitely trickier.
Yeah.
But for retirees or for someone buying a second home, a vacation home, it's not that difficult because there's an international treaty between France and the United States where we don't have to pay double taxes. If you can prove that you have enough income, you can get that 1-year visa to move here. So yeah, it's definitely doable.
And on the retirement visa side, is there a specific age that you have to be to have the retirement, or is it more income based?
Or I guess asset-based.
Basically, if you can prove that you are making a certain amount of money, have a certain amount of income per month, which is really the French minimum wage. I forgot how much it is exactly, but it's not that high. If you can prove that, yeah, any
Okay.
age really.
When Cecile mentions the minimum wage, or the SMC, as of February 2026, that's 1,800 euros per month gross that you need to have. For a long stay visa, most experts suggest showing closer to 2,500 to 3,000 euros just to ensure a smooth approval. But it's still incredibly accessible compared to most United States costs of living standards.
The only thing that can be tough is when you're buying a property in France, it's
Yeah.
hard to get a loan where sometimes you have to put like at least 50% down.
Yeah.
But if you're able to get that loan, even for 50% down, like the interest rates are like 3% right now in
Oh,
France.
wow. And about the 3% interest rate that Cecile mentioned, they've held that steady into early 2026. So while the United States interest rates have been really volatile and on the higher side, France's fixed rate system means that once you're in at 3 or 3.5%, you're locked in for the life of the loan. It provides a level of stability that's hard to find in other places. Property prices, is it similar to the United States or no?
No, you can get, I mean, depending on what part of France, of course, Paris is expensive, Nice is
Yeah.
expensive, Aix-en-Provence, the Riviera. But there are places in France where you can get like fixer-uppers in like the middle of the country, or like in the Dordogne, the southwest. Also, that's a pretty inexpensive part of France. You can get like little farmhouses, and you can get a lot more for your money here than in the US,
Yeah.
for sure.
And wine is cheaper. So there's
Wine is
so
cheaper, food is cheaper, of course, healthcare.
That's true. That's
That's
true.
it's a huge There's a huge debate going on right now in the French Congress about whether or not they should charge Americans or non-EU for get entry into the healthcare system. But even if they did, we would still be paying less here in France than in the US.
Okay, so when I talked to Cecile, there was some things that were still being worked out in Parliament. She mentioned the debate about charging Americans for healthcare, but it's no longer a debate. In late 2025, France passed an amendment requiring non-EU visitor visa holders to pay a mandatory annual contribution to access the healthcare system. It's fair and incredibly affordable. In fact, it's between 300 euros and 600 euros per year. Honestly, compared to the United States premiums, that's a massive win. So now let's take a quick look at where your expenses in the region that Cecile mentions could look like. To rent a 2-bedroom home in the United States, the average cost is around $2,800 per month. In France, it's around 1,100 euros or 1,200 US dollars. For health insurance in the United States, we're talking $600 to $1,200 per month. In France, it's about 50 euros or $55. For groceries in the United States, we're looking at about $700 a month. In France, you're looking at 400 euros or 450 US dollars. And for a glass of wine at a cafe in the United States, $14 will get you something. But in France, you're looking at 3 euros and 50 cents. I mean, that right there is a good reason to go. Before I jump into locations, one thing that's really cool to know as a foreign buyer is that you actually have the same rights as locals to own and purchase property. So you have it outright in your name, there are no restrictions. And that is honestly not the case everywhere in the world. So it's really nice to know that in France, you can own your home outright. Now let's get into specifics. I've selected a few regions that offer totally different lifestyles, but all share the same French sense of security and rule of law. Let's start with the area that Cecile recommended in southwestern France. It's called the Goldilocks zone because everything is just right. The weather, the community, and the prices. Picture this: rolling vineyards, over 1,000 castles. There's also a huge English-speaking expat community. So if you're worried about the language barrier, this is going to be a really easy place to start out your expat process. If you want to own your own home there, it's going to cost between 185,000 euros to 250,000 euros. The cheaper end will be a fixer-upper, but the upper end will be a move-in ready village house. If your budget is tight but your need for peace is high, look at the area called Creuse. It's part of what they call La France Profonde, or Deep France. It's really deep in the heart of the country. The vibe is super rural, it's quiet, and it's authentically French. There are more cows there than there are people. It's a perfect place to get away from it all for a writer's retreat, an artist's studio, or a woman who wants to be off the grid, but still protected by the French social system. If you need a reset, this is a really good option. But beware, you're going to need to speak some French there because the majority of people speak purely French. If you want to buy a place, you can get something as low as 80,000 euros. It's going to be a lovely little stone house for the price of a luxury SUV in the United States. Now, if you want the ocean, but you find the Riviera too expensive and flashy, Brittany is a really good spot to think of. It's the Pacific Northwest of France with rugged coastlines, lots of green, and it's very safe. You'll have salty air, crepes, cider, and a really independent local spirit. If you want long walks along a rocky beach, this is the spot for you. And prices are pretty stable, only 15 minutes inland. So you'll drive to the ocean for your walks, but you're still going to be in a really good spot. You can own a 2-bedroom for 215 to 280,000 euros. It'll get you a solid granite home with your own garden. It does feel affordable, but beware, the heating bills are going to be a little bit higher in the winter. But you're saving a lot on the lifestyle tax that you'd pay in the United States for a similar beach town in one of the safest areas of Europe. Okay, last but certainly not least, I had to include this here. If you want the warmth and sunshine of the Mediterranean, you can actually have that in France as well. Think about 300 days of sunshine, Roman ruins, and all of this beautiful lifestyle without paying the Riviera tax, living near a canal or the famous Les Halles food market. You can also own your own place for 175,000 euros to 230,000 euros on the upper end. It'll be a light-filled apartment or a really narrow city townhouse. So you're not going to get a massive amount of space in this area, but it's still affordable and reasonable. And you can reach the beach in only 15 minutes by car or bus, so you'll get that coastal lifestyle at a fraction of the cost of what it would be in the United States. Okay, let's sum it all up. I'll put a table here of the average rent in the various regions that we've talked about so you can see it, and that'll also be linked in the show notes. So let's just talk about one of my favorite things to think about when I envision my life somewhere else. What could your average day be like? This is going to sound like a daydream, but I promise you it is not. This is what a typical Tuesday could be like once you live in France. Oh, it's 8:30 in the morning, you rise and shine, and you walk to your local little boulangerie. A traditional baguette is going to cost you only a little over €1. You're not just buying bread, you're greeting your neighbors. This is a standard ritual and tradition that people have in France. At 10 o'clock in the morning, you're going to go work in the garden. You're just going to putter around. You're not going to experience really any hustle culture here. In rural France, the world stops between 12 and 2 p.m. for lunch. So why don't you go enjoy yourself? 12:30, go ahead and wander around. You'll go have a 3-course plat du jour at a village bistro for 16 euros. It's going to include local wine and better produce than you're going to find in a lot of other places. At 4 p.m., let's get you some community. You might head to the local marché or community fete. These spaces actually plan community events and they're very active. Since the United States election, more Americans have joined these expat hubs, but the goal is really to integrate and not just isolate. So this is a really great way to do that. And now, 7 o'clock and onward, you're not going to be worried about checking the news for the drama of the day. That's gone. That's out of your mind now. You're not going to be worried about more rollbacks to your autonomy and your bodily rights. You're going to be watching the sunset over a beautiful vineyard with a €5 bottle of world-class rosé. This is not a vacation. This is the standard of living in a society that prioritizes people over profit. Yes, there is life beyond pure capitalism. Congratulations. Here's to dreaming, planning, and living the dream. Go rewrite the rules. Santé.